This is the beginning of my journey into learning game dev and building a world of my own. Welcome to Trinity 64, a passion project I'll be working on in my spare time, and as the name suggests, it's planned to be an N64 inspired action monster tamer inspired by iconic franchises like The Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, and Dark Souls. While I've only just started working on this project for about a month, it's been heavily brewing in my mind for a year now. If you're unfamiliar with me, I'm Bilsu, and I run an art channel known as Bilsu Art that I somehow managed to gain quite the following within 2 years. People primarily follow me on that channel because of my Legend of Zelda and Pokemon crossover art project called Link Dimension. It's been my main project for a couple of years where I design creatures, characters, items, write lore, and come up with game concepts. This has caused a lot of people to want me to turn those ideas into a fan game, and while it's something I also want to be a reality, it was too large of a scope and too many barriers in the way, like Nintendo's ninjas. Despite that, I have always wanted to create a game. As an artist, I view games as the pinnacle art form. Within them, they have 3D and 2D art, music, sound design, world building, writing, acting, level design, sometimes puzzles. The list can go on and on. So I decided to take my skills I've gained from working on Link Dimension and apply them to my own universe, with my own characters, creatures, and world. And that universe is Trinity, a world where people known as guides form bonds with powerful creatures called guardians. While this world does pull from games like Zelda and Pokemon, it even pulls from media like How to Train Your Dragon and the Aragon book series. This video will be an introduction into my plans for the project, what I've learned and done so far, and answering some most likely popular questions. But feel free to ask whatever you want in the comments. So what have I learned so far as a game dev noob? Well, I learned the basics of Blender and how to make a low poly model, make N64 style textures, apply those textures to the model, bring the model into Unreal, which is my current engine of choice, build a very basic test environment, scrolling textures for things like water and lava, a texture shader to give my background trees some wind movement, make N64 style grass, an Ocarina of Time style bushes, implement a basic sign mechanic, learn about fog and ambient particles, and lastly create a sword design I made in an N64 style, and making it feel important and powerful. Now, all of this that I've done so far can be improved in so many ways. Most of it is just placeholder and to try and capture an aesthetic for what I would want for the game. As an artist, I worked in that direction versus coding a bunch of mechanics first. And while this all seems like it's very simple to implement, I'd be lying if I didn't say I watched many hours of tutorials, studied N64 environments, and troubleshooted to get here so far. And we're only just beginning, but I'm very excited for this journey. So let's answer some questions you might have and talk about the plans for Trinity 64. So why an N64 style for this game? Why not 2D? Or if I'm gonna do 3D, why not something that looks more high quality? Well, I can answer this with 3 words: skill, style, and performance. The reason why I'm choosing to not do a 2D game is simple. I just want to make a 3D world. It feels more immersive, and while it is more difficult, I think the payoff is more worth it. I'm not trying to make a game because it's easy. I want to make a game to learn and express myself, which leads into the aesthetic of the N64. While a lot of people may say that the N64 style is inferior to anything else you can do in 3D, I find it heavily charming and whimsical. Ocarina of Time was the first 3D game I ever played, and yeah, you can call it nostalgia, but I consider the N64 to be an art style, despite it being a limitation for the time. Low poly also allows me to make all my own assets and fairly quickly, which just isn't possible for a stereotypical Unreal Engine game. It also allows me to be a lot more artistic with my choices rather than relying on good graphics to carry the game. For the final reason of performance, that's pretty self-explanatory. Not only will it be less taxing on my computer to develop, but ideally will be playable by anyone with even a low-budget laptop. This is an important thing to me, as for the majority of my life I was never able to play a lot of computer games on the amazing graphics settings that they offered, since I didn't have a great computer. I want everyone who plays my game to have the same graphical experience. How will the game be Zelda-like? Well, firstly, you'll be playing as a protagonist that will, for now, be using a powerful sword in action combat. I'm also planning to add not only dungeons to the game, but heavily pull from the mechanics and style of Ocarina of Time. And you can't forget the Guardians essentially being like Zelda companions. How will the game be like Pokemon? Not just Pokemon, but all monster tamers require you to possess creatures in some form and use them, and Trinity 64 will be no different. But how it differs from Pokemon will be the battling system, since I want it to only be action-based and not turn-based. My biggest issue with modern Pokemon is the turn-based combat. It feels very archaic and boring. I want the combat to feel very arcade-like in Trinity, so fast, snappy sword swings. Alongside your sword skill, you will be able to use the creatures you caught by summoning them so that they can fight alongside you. This would be very similar to something like Echoes of Wisdom, where the creatures are using their own AI and maybe you could command when they would have a special ability available. But on top of that, you'll be like Link, where you can also fight alongside them. While I don't have any creatures to show today, since I want to take my time designing them for a 3D space, I think my Fakemon portfolio speaks for itself to show that I plan to have some pretty fun designs. If you want an example of the range of designs I want to include, here's 2 examples from stuff I made for Link Dimension. How will the game be a Souls-like? Well, not only does the game take inspiration from Elden Ring's spirit summoning mechanic, but I would want the main currency and way of leveling up your character and your guardians to be in the form of something like souls. So you can make the choice of how you want to spend your souls on the many different options. Alongside the souls would be the loss of souls upon death and having to retrieve them. I always found that to be a fun mechanic in Souls games, and even things like a potential dodge roll, and just like Zelda, a targeting system. The scope of the game is currently just a vertical slice. I want to see if I can make a simple starting area and first dungeon, with fleshed out mechanics and creatures. I want a fun game loop with a lot of art that has intent behind it. This game loop would involve you taking on difficult encounters alongside your guardians, and capturing guardians will likely involve some sort of quick time event, or something similar to capturing ghosts like in Luigi's Mansion, basically an action fishing game in disguise. And if you're like me when I was a kid playing Pokemon thinking mashing A was actually doing something. I hope what I've made so far and my plans for Trinity 64 has captured your interest in some way. I can only hope that I can push back any struggles of learning and just enjoy the process of discovering new skills. For the next devlog, I'm hoping to have a main character design, as well as implementing the first guardian, which is titled the Blossoms Sprite. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.